Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Christina Rivers.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, brought to you in part by mybookie.ag as well as our friends at TSE Total Sports Enterprises. My name is Brian E. Roach, the host who doesn't like toast, who doesn't like Teslas, who doesn't like any expensive things, in the fading fast hope that Terry Fletcher will buy them for me, but that never seems to work out anymore. So for this edition, I am joined by another SCU contributor, the one and the only, the beautiful and illustrious and intelligent Christina Rivers. How you doing today, Tina?
Oh, you are too kind.
Not really. You know me. I'm the get off my lawn guy.
I'm trying to be the gracious host.
That's right. There you go. You can be the gracious one. So, what we have this week is, of course, we get to look forward to some AFC North football, which is always a welcome kind of event. We kind of know what we're going to get. We kind of know what to expect, and it's with the lovely, and wonderful, very friendly, very, helpful group in Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bengals are coming to town to visit us, along with the gentleman named Mr. Perfect, quite the kind and caring young man that he is. It's really a high.
He has a giving spirit.
Yes, he does. He does. He enjoys giving. It's a fine young group of men that they have over there, don't you think?
Fine. They look very good in orange and stripes.
There you go. They look very good in orange and stripes. I love it. So, as we're looking to this game, I guess the first thing to start to look at is who is and who isn't likely to play, from our standpoint as well as from their standpoint. And the not terribly surprising news is Marcus Gilbert did not practice again on Thursday. He did not participate in practice on Wednesday. It certainly looks like whatever he did to the hamstring in that last game is carrying him over into this week, and he may be inactive for this game. But a little more surprising is Stephon Tuitt, who did not participate yesterday or on Wednesday and did not participate on Thursday either, with a back injury, and Vince Williams with a hip. Those would be two big losses to the defense, especially Tuitt, who has provided really just a tremendous presence on the other side of Cam Hayward. And it looks like Tyler Matakevich, Dirty Red, has gotten his health back in order. He was a full participant today, limited yesterday. Ramon Foster is a full participant, and he was limited last week. I don't think he played. PJ Finney played for him. So that's our side of it. What about the Bengals side?
On the Bengals side, I know they were concerned about Adam Pac-Man Jones. Steelers fans will love the fact that he could be held out on Sunday. And rookie receiver John Ross was limited second straight practice on Thursday, and this is his first week of practice since week 3. So on the Bengals side, they're saying right now it's pretty questionable that he'll be able to play. And Jones practiced at all on Thursday after being limited on Wednesday. So I'm anticipating that Darqueze Dennard, Dre Kirkpatrick, and William Jackson will be their 3 corners against the Steelers.
And that's the Bengals have dipped deep into the cornerback pool during the last few drafts, taking William Jackson, who many of us thought might be a Steelers pick, but they grabbed him right in front of us, as well as, Darqueze Dennard and the rest of that group. It's a pretty solid group, and they've got some depth there. So I don't know that Pac-Man Jones being out is really that great of a loss for them. Do you think?
No, it didn't look like they were really affected that much in their last games. So I would guess right now, he's probably kind of, how would you say it? He's injured, but how much of that is because he's seen playing time? I don't know.
Yeah, it's it's an interesting point. And, right now the Steelers have the number one passing defense as far as yards per game go in the league. But right behind them is the Bengals. So this is, as Ben said earlier in the week, it doesn't get any easier for the Steelers this week. And in many ways, because it is a known opponent with, let's be honest, they don't like each other. There's definitely hostility there. And it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a challenging game. The Bengals, I think Ed Bouchette called them the zombie team this year because it looked like, I think coming out 0-3, that they were just dead. They were dead in the water. And then they played Green Bay. They lost that game, but they made a great showing in that game. And then I think they've won 2 in a row. So they look like they're making an attempt to right their season. And the Steelers have kind of, up until really last week, which was about as dominant a performance on the defensive side as you could ask for, at least through 3 quarters, and a solid offensive performance, if not totally dominant. And other than the Ravens game, which I think was a pretty statement type of a game early on, the Steelers have kind of managed to limp through the season, winning some games and losing games that none of us thought they should lose. But I don't know what to expect from this Bengals team, whether it's going to be the Bengals from the first 3 games or the Bengals from the last 2 games.
What I found interesting was when I was doing the scouting report was that people that in the media world that cover the Bengals, getting locker room access, they get into the locker room and the players who just flat out didn't want to talk. A lot of people thought, they're upset about their season. AJ Green's come out publicly. Dre Kirkpatrick has come out publicly and said that the team sucked, quotes. And they thought that because they were upset about how the team has been going. But then there's the other side we're saying, well, maybe they really want to focus on the rivalry. But what's interesting, Dalton was willing to give in his press conference, he actually gave a soundbite where he said that he believes that people and teams have made this rivalry into more than what it is, that it's just another game. I don't know if there's some gamesmanship going on there, as in don't give them anything to pump them up. Let's go into Pittsburgh and let's surprise them, or if there really is an underlying uncertainty among the Bengals teammates about how well they can compete.
It's an interesting take, and I wonder, you'd think Andy Dalton should be, stepping up into a leadership position with that team. So that's kind of a leadership kind of move to come out and say, nothing to see here, move along. Let's not incite any emotional reaction from anybody. Just another game. Yes, we respect them, blah, blah, blah. We'll move along. But, the thing is, the animosity has never really been the Steelers' defense and the Bengals' offense, other than maybe a little bit between Jeremy Hill and Ryan Shazier. But it's their defensive unit that has sparked all of the controversy, let's say, between the two teams, and I don't think that's going to change. Now, Vontaze Burfict is not to quote what's his name, Dennis, the old coach from Minnesota. He is who we think he is. It's not just the Steelers that he tends to abuse. We saw him wipe out Max Williams with the Ravens, and he's served a suspension again this year for whatever reason. I think I can't remember what it was for. Do you remember what it was for?
It was for a preseason hit, I believe.
Yeah. So he's not a reformed individual, and Pac-Man Jones, of course, has had his problems. You add Joe Mixon into that mix, who knows? I don't want to actually lump Joe Mixon into that group yet, because to be fair to the young man, let's see if he is more than what that one incident in his past indicates that he may be. But there is the potential for character issue there. So you kind of would say it's expected of Andy Dalton or somebody who's in a leadership role on that team to step forward and say, yeah, it's no big deal. There's nothing going on, and try and ease things down, because what we've seen, especially over the last few seasons, the Bengals are their own worst enemies. You know, I mean, they lost their own playoff game. Yeah. So
yeah, they kill themselves with penalties and mistakes, and really, I mean, there's been so many games, even against Pittsburgh, where they've shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, it's so if they can play under control and without letting their emotions get the better of them and act in a undisciplined fashion, who knows? Now, the other part of this, and I still to this moment, I cannot figure out why they did this and what mentality went behind allowing multiple offensive linemen starters to leave your team and then not drafting anyone to replace them and just kind of hoping you can piece together a quality offensive line. That, if Stephon Tuitt can't go, at least we have, a much higher quality backup in Tyson Alualu than we had in the previous 2 seasons with Ricardo Matthews and Cam Thomas. And is that right? Cam Thomas. I think it's right. But, it would be great to see, our starters there, Hayward and Hargrave and Tuitt, because those guys have been on a mission this year. The penetration, even in the last game in Kansas City, the penetration those guys get in the middle of the line, allowing, and forcing the offensive line of the opposing team to kind of cave in to handle. They got to double team Tuitt. They got to double team Hayward. They've got to try and add a chip on somebody, and that frees up the linebackers to come in off the sides. They've talked about not having to blitz and being able to rush with just 4 guys or even 3 guys, and they've been doing that in a pretty solid fashion this year. So it will be kind of a disappointment if Tuitt can't go, because I kind of would just like to see them blow up this makeshift offensive line of the Bengals.
Oh, yeah. I mean, mistakes was letting Andrew Whitworth go. So, and like you said, their offensive line is kind of a piecemeal, patched up, let's see what we can do. But Andy Dalton already has 15 sacks on the season. If Tuitt was healthy, I mean, like you said, they had early struggles. The Steelers' defensive line had early struggles. They were, and the linebackers, they were over pursuing. They were getting into the offensive backfield, but they'd over pursue the play. They cleaned that up, and then, here they walk into Kansas City and hold them to almost no yards in the first half of the game, and they just keep improving week after week after week. So having Tuitt in the, on the line is a big boost for Pittsburgh. And the Bengals have been wanting to get the running game really established. And seeing that would be a reason why maybe Andy Dalton wouldn't say too much, because maybe they're seeing that as, we're going to try and exploit that area now.
Yeah, it could be. I was going to ask you about that. Since you did the scouting report on the Bengals, the Steelers tend to be okay in rush defense against power rush teams, teams that don't want to stretch to the sides, that want to run up the middle. But they have had problems, as they did in Chicago, as they did with Jacksonville, handling teams that want to run, that zone blocking scheme and stretch the line out and try and get to the outside. They have gap problems, or they have had and shown themselves to have gap discipline problems. They don't fill correctly. Some of the defensive line tends to get washed away when they have to stretch out. So when you were looking at the Bengals, what's their style? What is it? I mean, maybe they aren't even identified yet, but what kind of running attack are they going to throw at the Steelers?
Well, it's kind of interesting because they've got Jeremy Hill, they've got Giovanni Bernard, and they've got Joe Mixon, and they've all been sharing the load. Right now, Mixon has the most attempts and the most yards, but out of the 3, he's got the lowest average yards per play. But he's also the only one that has a touchdown. So they're kind of still trying to find an identity. I mean, it's like a 3-headed monster. I'm not sure they know who they're going to put in to be their premier back. They're kind of running at the same time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we kind of speculated, what are they going to do with Joe Mixon? I mean, they already had a tandem of quality backs, but the other side of that coin is maybe Jeremy Hill's got some wear on him. Maybe Giovanni Bernard does. And they were two different kinds of backs as well. And Mixon is unquestionably a talented back and was a steal for them where they picked him up, even though I don't know that anybody else was going to do it because of the potential character issues that he had. So they added them. John Ross has been a bit of in my mind, John Ross has been exactly what we expected, which is he's going to come in, he's going to get hurt, and he's not going to show up.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's been pretty much a non-factor.
Yeah, I mean, he can be dynamic when he's healthy. He's just never healthy, and that's the way it's been with them so far this year. He's so, I guess, I don't want to say frail, but he's so small, you do wonder, if I'm not mistaken, he hurt himself doing his 40 at the combine.
Yeah.
So, if you can't run a combine and stay healthy.
Yeah, he could use a little bulk. Maybe you should give him some training tips.
Yeah, training tips. I will pump you up. Not me.
Speaking about the rushing game, it's interesting. Mixon is kind of their power back, and they're using him. I mean, he has, compared to the others, Mixon has 13 first downs versus Hill's 4 and Birdie. Now, what's interesting is in the receiving game, Giovanni Bernard is the one who has targets and yards, and he has 2 touchdowns. So the only players on the Bengals team that have touchdowns this season are A.J. Green, Giovanni Bernard, and Tyler Kroft.
That's not a dynamic performance.
Rushing touchdowns. No. And as far as rushing touchdowns, they only have 1, and that was last week. Joe Mixon got his NFL debut rushing touchdown. So I think when we talk about what they might show Pittsburgh, I think they're going to use a mix of Jeremy Hill and Mixon if they stay true to what they've been doing to kind of pound the ball, throw Giovanni Bernard out in there. He's a versatile guy because he's so small. He can hide behind the line, and he can make quick bursts out of there, even though he had knee surgery and it took him a long time to get back. I mean, he actually looks quicker this year than he did previously, and he's making better cuts. But it's obvious that he's getting open, out of the backfield, that Dalton, when he's getting into trouble or he needs an outlet pass, that he's finding Bernard.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because I guess that's been his modus operandi since he's been there. He's been a great third down back for them, and a dual threat. And I guess you got to ease Mixon in, but if you want that same kind of attack they used to have, where it was Hill and Bernard, then Mixon's kind of taking the Hill role, right? Does that seem about the way it's going?
Well, it's what it appears to be. And on film, it seems like they're using Hill in situations where they really need to just really pound the ball. But at the same time, if you look at Mixon's numbers, it looks like they're using him to get first downs that they can't get through the air.
Yeah. Do you think, based on where we're at, do you think this is a rush attack that is going to be a challenge for the Steelers to handle, or is it something that might fit into their wheelhouse?
Oh, based on the personnel, with Tuitt not in there, I think this is going to be a challenge because I could see them trying to mix in more of, like you said, doing what the Bears and the Jaguars did is, not run everything down the gut, but, swing some of the stuff out to the sides.
Yeah, and Dalton is not adverse to running, some option stuff and taking it himself.
Oh yeah, he can get square.
Yeah, so I think the line on this game, the Bengals are currently getting 5 points, and I think the over/under is about 40.5. So for folks who are interested in betting, there's really a great place to go to place your bets. We get asked about this quite often. We get asked, what the spread is, who should we bet on, what's coming up in the game. And, we tell folks that it's sometimes just as important where you place your bets as to who you place your bets on. That's why we always recommend mybookie.ag. MyBookie.ag has been around for a very long time. They have a rock-solid reputation. They have a great web interface and a mobile interface that allows you to get all the information you need to place smart bets on the teams that you want to bet on. And it's not just football. You can bet on baseball, soccer, golf, anything probably that you want to bet on in the world. So head over to MyBookie.ag and use the code Steel City. When you use the code Steel City, you can get up to 100% bonus on your first deposit with your new sign up. So jump on over to mybookie.ag, sign up, use the Steel City code, make your bets, win, and get paid. That's right, you get paid. And in fact, you get paid in an industry-leading 2 days with mybookie.ag. So play, win, and get paid. That's mybookie.ag. When you think about that line, as we were talking about with MyBookie, if 40.5 points seems maybe high, the way that the Steelers have not been putting up points in large numbers, and the Bengals have been kind of inconsistent. What do you think? What do you expect out of the scoring for this game?
Oh, traditionally these games have been settled by, so close. They've always been so close. Not quite as close as the Ravens games, but I definitely think that the Bengals are going to bring the best that they have. I'm not sure if the best is good enough for the win, but what was the point spread?
+5. The Bengals getting 5 points. So the Steelers are -5. If you take the Steelers, you're giving up 5 points.
I think that's probably pretty close.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
I don't anticipate this is going to be a high-scoring game.
No, based on history, these tend to not be high-scoring games. There's been a lot of 19-16, 18 to this. What I think Boswell kicked 6 field goals in one of these games one time. Neither team tends to blow the other out, and it makes sense. Cincinnati has a solid defense. Carl Lawson, who we haven't talked about yet, has been in many cases better than advertised, and has stood up well and is a different kind of rusher than the Steelers are used to dealing with from the Bengals.
Yeah, and I've been a little bit surprised at Nick Vigil. I mean, he's really been putting some pressure on their opponents. I mean, he's got 24 solo tackles. He's got a sack, 7 tackles for a loss, sack for 7 yards lost. 3 tackles for loss, an interception, and 3 passes defensed. I mean, he's really picked it up this year as far as is a surprise on their team.
Yeah, so it's a solid defensive unit. I think that's going to challenge the Steelers. The funny thing is the Steelers seem to play the Bengals better when they play in Cincinnati. When they've lost to the Bengals, it feels like it's been at home, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I mean, I think last year they managed to sweep them, but the year before I think they split and they won it in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati won in Pittsburgh. But I agree with you. I don't expect this to be high scoring. I expect something like a 23-17, 23-20, maybe even less than that kind of game. I think this will be a tough game for the passing attack to get on track. I think that they need to rely heavily on Le'Veon Bell again, and try and really ground it out. Let the offensive line try and push the Bengals around. I mean, the one thing that if we remember, I think I read this today, that when Le'Veon plays the full game, when he's in the full game, they win. And when he goes out of the game, either for injury or he misses the game, they lose to the Bengals. So hopefully Le'Veon can continue on the tremendous game he had last week. The offensive line can continue on that trend, and we can come out of this one with a win. Where do you think they need to focus their efforts?
Well, every week the panel, we talk about, what we think the keys to the game are going to be, for the Pittsburgh Steelers to secure the win. And I tend to agree. It took Bell a little bit to get gelled back into the offense, but then, he's kind of off. He's had a couple good games now. And I know there was some concern last week with Gilbert and then Foster leaving the game and having backup linemen, I have to give kudos to the backup linemen because they actually did a really nice job of giving him the option. Now, the Steelers don't get a lot of credit for their offensive line being heads up smart. The week before, well, against Jacksonville, they got caught being kind of lazy. Several balls were batted down. A couple of the interceptions were as a result because they didn't execute their blocks correctly. Against Kansas City, even losing 2 of their starters and putting in the backups, they did a really good job of opening holes. And if you watch Le'Veon Bell, he's so smart about, I mean, if he has to run up the back and jump off his shoulders, he'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He's a magician at finding creases that those guys open up that I don't even think they know are there. And that's what they're going to need to do.
They're looking straight ahead, and I mean, they're looking straight ahead. They're pulling, they're getting out in front in the blocks, and he's just patiently waiting behind them. I mean, it's like a game of hide and seek for the defense. Which way is he going to go? Is he going to come out this side? Is he going? And he's so smart about that. It's going to be critical if the Steelers want to be able to open up their playbook, because they're not getting a lot of production from the receivers outside of AB.
Yeah.
They really need to get Bell involved in both the run and the passing game and open things up. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about the disappointment that tight ends for the Steelers haven't been more involved as far as being the passing game. Because for years, we were so used to seeing Ben Roethlisberger, he extends the play, he finds Heath Miller, it's a big gain, and everybody goes wild. And Vance McDonald and Jesse James just aren't that level of tight end.
No, they aren't. You're right.
I've also noticed that, but I've noticed too that Todd Haley hasn't been utilizing a ton of tight end plays, in them open in the slots as much. They've been using them for extra blockers. So I keep telling everybody, I'd really like to see them open the full playbook, but because they don't have that outside threat right now, other than Antonio Brown, they don't really have a true number 2 who's also a threat. It kind of makes it so that you have to compress. You have to keep your tight ends close. They're not getting open. You're using them as much as you can, but when you have to have extra help blocking to try to get plays down the field, that's where I think some of the inconsistency people are seeing. They're watching the game and they think powered offense. Well, the problem is that everything's not clicking, and so you're not seeing the full playbook.
Yeah, that's very true. I think part of it is still Ben getting used to Vance McDonald. I mean, he came into training camp a little late. I think that there's a learning curve there. I think Jesse James, and I've said this before, I think Jesse James has taken a step backwards this year. And whether that's because Vance McDonald is there or whether it's just because, Jesse James had peaked and that was what he was going to be. I mean, we never expected him to be a breakout, Heath Miller quality type of tight end. He was always going to be, a good tight end, but not a great tight end. And then, poor Xavier Grimble, the X-Man just hasn't had a chance. And I think he was even inactive last week as a healthy scratch. The tight end position, maybe, with the throw that Ben made to Vance McDonald, maybe there starts to be the budding of that relationship where they can start to trust each other. Because I think Ben has been maybe, and he would never say this, of course, but I think it's possible he's a little gun shy. Not from getting hit, but to throw to these guys who he may not have the same level of trust in that he needs to have to give them the chances to make plays on the ball. Martavis has been gone for 18 months, hasn't played in that long. He has looked rusty sometimes throughout the season. He and Ben have not looked like their timing is on and that they're on the same page. There was the whole Martavis controversy this week that I don't think is really even a real thing. But if he can come alive, then they've got that number 2 that they so desperately need. But he has to prove it. I mean, he has the reputation. when they made it work, before he got the suspension. But he needs to show he can still be that guy. They need to connect on a couple deep balls. He needs to show that explosiveness so that people can't just go, we're gonna double up on Antonio Brown, and that kind of happened last game, even without Martavis really exposing things. They basically said Marcus Peters is going to cover Martavis Bryant, period, end of story, and the other corner's going to handle Antonio Brown. And it didn't really work out so well for them because
no, it didn't.
Antonio had himself a game. The difference is, I think the Bengals have deep quality at the cornerback position, and so they can afford maybe even to go, just to man up with these guys and see what happens, and say you're going to beat us. Yeah,
and I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see them challenge these receivers for the Steelers this week, especially since the Bengals are really, really counting on their defense. Pretty much, the defense has been carrying them.
Yep, I think you're right. Yep, go ahead.
You were talking about trust. One thing that Andy Dalton did say was that part of maybe some of the inconsistencies that he's had is learning to trust that the guys that are going to get open, that when you throw the ball to them, they're going to make the catch. And you brought up that Roethlisberger may be a little gun shy. What about Ben is, I don't think that he's not confident in his play. Sometimes some of the things that he said in the past 2 weeks came across that he was, not confident. I don't think that it's a confidence issue. I think it's a trust issue in this ball, the field, and that's where you're supposed to be. Will you be there when the ball gets there?
Yeah, I agree, and that's what I kind of meant by gun shy. It's not that he's doubting himself or doubting, his ability. It's that there's not that confidence that, somebody like Juju, who fell down and was out of place and cost him a couple interceptions, because he's still building a rapport with him, like Vance McDonald, who he just doesn't know well enough yet, like Martavis, who's been away, like Justin Hunter, who barely ever gets to play. And again, they just don't have that rapport with him the way AB is, and they're never going to have. Nobody's going to have that kind of rapport. That's a special. That's a special relationship that AB and Ben have, and they, where they just know instinctively how to work off of each other. But even AB cost him an interception last week, and so it's going to take time for those other guys to get connected, and I think it will progress as the season progresses. But that has to happen. Otherwise, it is going to continue to be the AB show, and a couple other guys get the ball thrown at them.
If you have to win games based off of a helmet deflection, that's not a good foreboding for your season. Yes, you love to see a big splash play, and everybody gets excited. And one of the things that makes Antonio Brown so exciting is that he knows the routes so well that if he sees Ben in trouble, he'll just make his own route.
Yeah.
These other guys, they're not as creative. They're not as well versed maybe in the playbook as far as like they're trying to run the specific route. If they get bumped off the route, they don't know how to improvise as well. And I think that's what makes Antonio Brown so special. Roethlisberger has that level of trust with him that, hey, if I get in trouble, I got to look for 84 because I know that he's going to run a bizarre route that's not even a route to get open for me.
Yep, I agree.
And when you don't have when that breaks down, the problem is if these other guys aren't consistent in catching, you're going to watch defenders pull off of them, and then they all zero in because they have to hit Brown to complete the play. So it's kind of a, we know that they're a high-powered potential offense, but until they click and get that where they have confidence in each other to do the job, Ben's going to be a little bit afraid to go too deep, and he doesn't want to have a repeat performance of the Jaguars.
Absolutely. So I think that we can agree this is going to be a good game. It's going to be a hard-fought game. It's going to be AFC North football. Before we sign off, I want to remind everybody that if you're a member of a Steelers fan group or you attend game watching parties, go ahead and shoot us an email at fanmail@steelcityunderground.com. And we're looking to pick our next fan group spotlight. We did one with Southeast Pennsylvania fans. That was a nice time. Unfortunately, it was the Jaguars game. But, those were a good group of people. So we're looking for our next fan club spotlight. Hook up with that. In addition, if you've got questions, anything you want to ask us, send us the same emails, fanmail at steelcityunderground.com. I want to thank Tina for joining us tonight. Tina, tell everybody how they can follow you, check you out on social media, and find you in all those newfangledy communication ways.
Well, the easiest way to follow me is on Twitter, and it's at the number 3 Rivers, RIVERS _writer, WRITER.
So everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us in this edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. Again, my name is Brian Roach. She is Tina Rivers. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, be good, be safe, and we will talk to you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.